Let's see. All right, thanks everybody for being here. This is week 3. Let me get this one more in here, still a couple. Appreciate you guys. It's been fun hearing from some of you, talking about the previous classes. If you hadn't had a chance, they are not fancy recordings. In this season, I'm like, yeah, I'm just pumping stuff up, so we're not getting much editing. But if you go to my YouTube channel, you'll find this class. And so basically what I do is I just load them up. I put a bumper in front of them and I load them to YouTube. So classes 1 and 2, it's not fancy. Sometimes it's the face, it's not. I apologize, but hey, it's getting out there. As well will go up. I'm going to try to load it this afternoon. I have a pretty open schedule. If you guys have questions, before we dive into Strengths Finder themes that I don't hit, just shoot me a question through the chat here. I'll take a look at that. Let me get this off here, participants. But before we do that, just want to dive into some questions from last time. They came up after people signed off. There were just 2. One, someone asked about the question about Strengths Finder themes changing. And this comes up quite a bit. You may have taken strengths in the past through universities. A lot of times the freshman programs are giving Strengths Finder themes in the early days, or you're taking it other jobs. Gallup would say that the most time through is going to be the first. It's going to be the first to take it. And so the accuracy numbers, in fact, in the validation report, the accuracy numbers that you hear spouted back and forth end up being the first time or second time. I believe originally, if my mind is right, it was 98% test retest reliability on the first set of results. It's 89% on the second set of results. As far as changing, here's the deal. Your results, you have a score for all 34 themes, okay? The system, then we're looking at the top 5 report, the system is basically giving you your 5. What you're gonna find is that I've had people take the same, I've had people take it and get the same 5 in order, like multiple times. That is pretty likely. However, you can get the same 5, but in different order. What you're gonna find is that as you go down from the top, from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the themes get separated by less and less. So your 4, 5, 6, and 7 is separated by less than percentage points. Because each theme, there's a quantitative score, 1 to 34, but there's also a qualitative score of 100. So let's imagine you and I both have woo or positivity. In a system that we can't see is a strength of that strength score. So woo for you might be 98%. It might be 96%. So still, we both have woo in a top 5, but it's different. Well, take it again. You may find that day, based on responses, based on environmental factors, you answered a little different. So suddenly, instead of it showing up at 2, it shows up at 4. So what you've typically done is you've seen the variation in our responses. What ends up happening, though, is that you're actually in that moment just seeing further down your list. Typically, you're going to find 3 that are core that will show up every single time, okay, in some form. 2 maybe at the least. What you're not going to find is the 34 becomes 5. You're typically not going to find it jumps like that. As we get a little further in, I do some more coaching in the last couple of weeks. We're going to basically show how we actually pull from all 10. Well, you need more. Sometimes it's 13. But the system in this first report gives you 5. So taking it multiple times, it's not like, oh, my theme's, the list is being cut off. You're just seeing more and more that are actually within your 5. So always look for a core, which then actually leads me to the second that people ask, which was, how do you find your dominant 3? How do you find your dominant 3? Gallup doesn't talk as much as it did in the early days when it first came out. They talked a lot about there was a dominant, it wasn't in the order. Your Strengths Finder themes are not in order of how you use them. They are in order of capacity, meaning investment. Think of a stock portfolio where your number 1 stock on a list of 5 stocks, not these days, but your number 1 stock on a list of 5 stocks let's imagine, is 100 times return. Number 2 is 75 times return. 3 is 50. Number 2 is 20 times. And then 5 is 10. That's a return on the investment. Put $1 in, you get $100 out. So people might say, wow, my number one is my number one based on the return of focusing on it. What if I told you number 4, which is only a 2 times return, is Apple at $900 a share, and number 1 is Delta at $12 a share? Yes, the return on investment matter, but the value, the original weight of each theme is different. So within your 5 are 3 typically that are the most dominant or might resonate the most with you. I'm realizing that a better way to think about that is not which ones are dominant. Instead, think of it this way: which ones fire first? Because we use all of our themes. Okay, we use them all in different ways. And what I realized is, as I was working through, and I'll do this with some of us, is that I was working through the list, and the themes, it's not a matter of you like them or don't like them, it's which ones your brain grabs first. Those first themes that your brain grabs for end up being the filter. Remember, communication, decision-making, collaboration, that's the filter on our mouth, our ears, and our decision-making. When it comes to, it's which themes pull first. So in fact, for me, first time I took StrengthsFinder, I ended up with woo, communication, command, activator, and positivity. Okay, woo, communication, command, activator. Let me do this actually. I'll share this just to kind of give you something else to look at besides my ugly mug here. Woo, communication, command, activator, positivity. Okay. Forgive me for not just coughing into my hand there. When it comes to themes, what I find is that woo came out as number 1. However, when it comes to how I live my life and the day-to-day of my life, I actually lean significantly deeper into communication first. So one of the things I do, and you'll see this as I talk about how we coach with this, is that if this is, because this is my list, the questions I would ask myself if I was coaching myself, like, okay, Mike, when a problem crosses your desk, do you try to make people feel happy? Do you try to understand? Do you give orders? Do you dive into next steps? Or do you tell everybody it's gonna be okay? And I'm like, you know what? I'm a lot of things. I'm very smiley, but the reality is I want to understand first. So for me, communication. Okay, Mike, after you understand communication, I'm gonna do this. Communication. All right, Mike, after you understand, do you try to cheerlead? Woo. Do you give orders? Do you give orders, kind of like own it? Do you dive into it, or do you tell everybody it's going to be okay? Well, I don't tell everybody it's going to be okay yet, and I don't really cheerlead for it. Sometimes I dive in, but often I take command. I take action. Once I understand, I then dive into it. I act on it. I'm like, okay, this is mine. What's the caution? What's the ramifications? What's the problems? Then I act. While I'm diving in, I tell you it's going to be okay, and I encourage you to come along. But first, for me, is going to be communication, because I need to understand it. Then I need to feel like I own it. I act on it. Now, imagine a whole different scenario. Imagine instead that I'm dominant positivity. So the first thing when a problem crosses my desk ends up being, oh my gosh, it's going to be okay. Don't worry. Nobody worry. It's all right. It's all right. It's great. No, it's okay. No, seriously, whatever you need. That's going to be the first thing out of me. And then, oh, it's okay. I mean, anybody can come along. Just join. It's totally all right. Yes, I love having it. The more the merrier. And we don't necessarily have to act. We could just talk to each other. And we could just start there. Like, help me understand. See, and I would create messaging. And then eventually I might act. Eventually I might do more. But do you see how that works? Mm-hmm. Ultimately, the order matters. This is why you can have people with similar themes and you be significantly different. It's okay. to have all those pieces kind of going together. So when it comes, you're going to see when I walk through it, it's this idea of your 5 themes. Of your 5 themes, which themes are the ones that fire first? Which themes are the ones that get your attention, that when you'll hear me say, when a problem crosses your desk, when you meet someone for the first time, which themes describe what it is that's firing first for you? And so the problem crossing your desk is my attempt to get you thinker, to think through thinking thought. First, meet someone for the first time, like the questions you ask, I'm trying to get those who are more feelers, more relational, kind of getting those places. And so I say, which ones fire first? Typically, and it's also a reordering. There's times when it comes to strengths finding things that you're reordering. When it typically in here, there's 1 and 2 that are almost a winner. They kind of are the pair that fit the most. And there's a third that kicks in. So for me, it's communication, command, positivity. Okay. So I'll talk more about that, but for the questions that came up, I want to make sure I hit that. Also, let's see. Somebody had a question in the chat. Let me check it this way. Oh, thank you, Sean. Sean is watching Fox News. You guys saw my post? This guy, he literally had it right here on our video screen and watched Fox News during our one-on-one. I was like, great. I'm like, where exactly are you, sir? He's like, Oklahoma. And I was like, don't disparage Oklahoma people like that. But not exactly great. Hey, could somebody let's start with 5. Give me 5. You can't give me all yours because I'll deep dive you guys later, but give me 5 themes you want me to talk about today. Somebody bravely unmute or either post it in the chat because that's how I'm going to pick the themes we're going to cover. Matt wants significance. Okay. What else? Context. Somebody else give me another one. Huh? Context. Okay.
Connectedness.
Responsibility.
Connectedness.
Responsibility, connectedness. Okay, and let's do positivity arranger, achiever. Okay, I'll see what I can get through. We'll stop there for now, but if you didn't get yours in, hit me up. All right. If you're interested as well, just so you know, on that YouTube channel, there are videos from 2016. I did like 5 minutes on every StrengthsFinder theme from my apartment in San Diego. If you go to my YouTube channel and go to the playlist, 34 themes, you should find a little video on every single one of these 5. Some of this will sound familiar if I've done that for you guys already before, but if you're interested, you can always check that out too. It's available now. You don't have to wait. So, all right, let's do this. Okay, my sharing screen's going here. Here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna start with significance. I scribble, so don't mind me. See the chat real quick. Okay. Here's what I'm gonna do. I'm actually going to, you're gonna find, and if I don't do this, and somebody out there has discipline and responsibility, keep me honest, because on some of these, I'll cast it. I'm gonna give you the essence, what I call the essence of the theme. Essence, however that works. I'll give you some actions. I'll kind of talk about the communication, right? The communication, decision-making, right, themes. And then I'm gonna do like dark sides. Dark sides. If you don't hear me, if I skip something, I don't give you like the essence of what I mean by that, somebody like unmute and say, hey, could you give me the essence on that? Because I'll go and I won't always keep track, okay? Here's the thing. What I have found, and this is my own experience, there's a lot of good Gallup information that's out there. And in fact, if you've taken StrengthsFinder, you have access to the PDF of the book that gives you the signature definition for each one. What I have found in my 15 years of doing this is a different approach on some of these. The way to think about StrengthsFinder themes is like ingredients in a recipe. How you mix the ingredients in the recipe determines pretty much everything. What it ends up is that, again, you've heard me say salt with chili makes it hotter, salt with caramel and chocolate makes it heaven. It's kind of my own joke. I do it every time. but it's this idea that the ingredient mixed alters the other things. So I'm going to describe these in a bubble, but it always depends upon the profile and the mix. So it's like watching Top Chef where they're given 10 ingredients and told to make something. Over time, you just learn what each ingredient actually means and what that looks like. And so it ends up being this whole approach of what is an essence of that theme. And so there's other elements to it. It depends upon the rest of the profile. But so I'm going to do this right now. For significance, it's going to be legacy. Legacy. What will last? What will survive? What's going to be here long term? What will they say about me? Significance is a really dangerous theme. It's an influencing theme. Significance, it's one of the rarest in the world, but people with significance are like, what will they say about me when I'm dead? What will outlast me? What's going to be the future? When will the parade be where they children sing songs and have balloons and flowers and that they praise my name and there's a holiday named after me? Significance, as you can imagine, can be really dangerous when it's turned internally because they want you to know they are significant. So they're driven to go, I want to partner with people who matter. By itself, it can be really, really dangerous. The beautiful thing about significance, though, is and like most of our themes, genius when turned out. I have watched people with significance who, when they tell someone else what is significant in their life, they say it with such clarity that we go, oh, you really see that in me? It's transformative. People with significance, if this is pointed in the right direction, out, not in, you call out the clearest truth in us, find the deepest pieces. And so you want to do things that matter. The challenge, so the action is then, it's all about partnering and creating legacy. So for people with significance, they actually like to partner, but they want to partner with the best. So they're always looking, who can I partner with? Who can I work with? At its best, it means they're tying in and going, how do I go after working with the best of the best? But that also means significance if you're not careful. You can walk into a room and walk right past people that your significance radar doesn't pick up. You walk in the room and you don't even see me. And it's not like you're intentionally choosing to not see me, but if our brain is a radar, significance, you suddenly go, oh, they're not significant. Because your mind has a radar that goes legacy, legacy, legacy. Who here is doing things that matter, that last? So when they communicate based on long-term future. They don't like to invest in things that are short run. They don't matter. Just again, would create the legacy. Here, this will really have a splash for us. This partners us with the best of the best. The dark side of significance ends up being what you imagine it would be, is that you start to constantly be seeking to be significant. Now, significance for me is number 7, I think, or 8. It's in my top 10. Definitely feel it, okay? By the way, I'm a person of faith. I follow, and so for me, especially as a person of faith, it's a challenge because I've had people say this is the least Christ-like of all themes. And so, because I'm like, well, yeah, maybe. Although I do think Jesus was pretty significant. There's been quite a legacy, but that's another story. When it comes to significance, the dark side ends up being that I can be overly ambitious. So my challenge is always, hey, God, I want to be significant, but I'm going to let you define the definition of the word significance. The issue isn't significance. The issue is trying to define it ourselves. How do we define significance out? How do we say the definition of my legacy isn't going to be in here, it's going to be out there? So legacy, partner with the best. They communicate about long terms. The dark side significance is that if you don't watch out, you become a kingdom builder, trying to build castles for yourself and won't partner with people who don't want to build castles with you. That's significance. Sound good? Questions on significance, anybody? Context. People with a theme of context. Context. The essence of context is history, the past. People with context believe our past informs our future. If you have context, you'll find that people with context often, one of the first, I don't know if anyone has it here, one of the first things out of your mouth is, so where did you grow up? They ask about like where you were as children, because that even tells them something. Oh, I grew up in California, or I grew up on the East Coast. Context believes in history. They believe in past precedent. People with context, I will find they will often have studied history or law because they like past precedent. They enjoy looking backwards. And so they believe our past informs our future. And so I had one married couple on a call last week. He has futuristic, she has context. And so when it comes time for them to plan anything, from a new vacation on, they're like, well, it's where we want our vacation. She instantly, I think I told you this already, she replays every past vacation they've ever had to figure out which vacations were good or bad. He dreams about what's possible. Their brains go in opposite directions when it comes to new information. People with context, they're like a train on a track. Think of context as each decision over time is building a track. Well, a train doesn't make fast right-hand turns. Think of how a train turns. Slow. It's a long bending track over time. So context has to make long, slow approaches, and then they slowly turn. They want to make sure they're honoring original intent. What did we say we would do back there? What has happened? And so if they think something is wrong now, they'll say that doesn't fit. Few things will make context lose their mind quite as much as repeating mistakes. Context hates repeating mistakes. The first time, they're like, oh, it's okay, it just happens. But if you repeat a mistake, context loses. They're like, why? Because they feel like they saw it before. And so context is history. It's past, it's kind of, and so when it comes to community, when it comes to comms, you're gonna find that context feels the need to give you all the background. Knowing the person forever, you ask them to create a plan, and yet they walk in and say, okay, now 20 years ago when this started, and they start to give you blow by blow by blow. And you're like, what on earth? Dear God, dude, like, I don't need as much evidence. Here's what that is. Context, when they communicate, they think of listening and speaking. They listen for the context and the history in the background. So when it comes to communication, they give you the history in the background. Context, you may notice, because I always say StrengthsFinder themes are a really great dashboard to our health. You may notice the more tired you are and the more stressed you are, the more you feel the need to make your case. The more you feel the need to give me every bullet of evidence, to give me all this extra data. So you may find, let that be a sign. Why do I feel so compelled to give the background every time? That could be a sign that you're stressed. Here's the other thing. If you know me and we're friends and you've earned that spot with me, feel free to skip to the end. Jump, move ahead. Do I really need to give this person context? They were there at the beginning. Why am I giving this? Is that about you or about them? See, significance, right? That other theme is about me or about others. Context. Are you giving me the context because I really need it? Or are you giving me the context because you want me to think you're smart? See, all of our themes either medicate a desire or need we have, or they actually help others. And so you have to ask, it's not about what theme you use, it's about why you're using the theme the way you're using it. So for communication, they often give background, data, history. When it comes to decision making, they pick the solution that has the best track record. So context, you may find you're stressed or struggle when you're in a world that you've never seen before, if you have no history for it. Decision making when there's no previous context can be exhausting. What can you compare it to? You got to be able to compare it with something well. The dark side of context, you'll hear it. People will say, There's nothing new under the sun. Context thinks they've seen it, been there, done that. So any new idea that comes out, if context has slipped to the dark side, it's dominant, they're exhausted, and they're frustrated, they're convinced that no new idea matters because the reality is they've seen it all. Yep, we tried that 3 years ago, didn't work then. Be aware, context, that the world has changed and you change. And so the situation isn't exactly the same. But people with context, they believe our past informs our future. They give us evidence. They like history and law because it sets a precedent. They hate repeating mistakes. They also prioritize solutions with history. Just so you know, context is like a cousin to connectedness. Context connects on a track the past. Connectedness connects the past, the present, the future, the side. It's all connected. It's like a spider diagram in a circle. So they see ripples that don't exist yet. They see ripples that can't be measured. They see connections that aren't even there. But there is a connection, there is a similarity to them. Context, it'll be targeted to a topic and a past. Connectedness, it's a connection to everything. Does that make sense, context, Mr. Sean? Any questions about context? We cool? I think somebody had a, let's see if I had. Yeah, so any questions in here? Yes. So let's do connectedness while I'm in here, shall we? Connectedness. Anybody out there got connectedness? A couple of you. Connectedness. Okay. Connectedness was originally called spirituality. Gallup thought it sounded too religious, and so they changed it to connectedness. But if you read their definition, it can still sound a little bit too, I think the word is a little bit too niche, someone said. It's very woo-woo. It's very like, oh, you see the life and all these things. The core of connectedness is connection, obviously, hence the name, connection. That's the essence. So they see the connections, they see the pattern, they see symbols. I can be all worried about throwing a rock into a lake. They go, a rock right here creates a wave that does this. A rock right here creates a wave that does that. And so they will see those ripples and those actions. If they're a person, if faith is part of their context, whether Christian, Muslim, Buddhist, or whatever it may be, they also connect the greater world to the movement of their. They see it. They see patterns. They see the interaction. And in fact, it's often there's a spirituality with connectedness. But here's the other thing: people with that connectedness makes them really, really good at cause. Meaning, connectedness does best when there is a cause attached. If you have connectedness, you do best with a reason why. Yes, I'm doing this thing, but like a spider, think of a spider, it's connected to this and this and this and this and this, and it creates a pattern for you. Because suddenly then the moment is not, I'm just doing this one thing. Suddenly you are doing it for all these other causes. You're doing it for all these other reasons, and it matters. So to save your own life, to save the life of one child is to save your own life. Because if you make the world better for one, you make the world better for all. People with connectedness, diversity. People with connectedness are excellent at diversity. They love things different than them, people different than them, situations different than them. For this reason, you are amazing international travelers. I have traveled the world for the better part of almost 20 years. And it's funny, you can always tell people with connectedness and those who don't. People without connectedness, they step off airplanes and they're like, oh, this place is so different. The smells are different. The food is different. Oh, how will I survive? Connectedness steps off a plane in a foreign country and goes, oh my goodness, you have 2 legs, I have 2 legs. We're exactly the same. You have 2 eyes, I have 2 eyes. We're the same. Like, you have children, I have children. We're the same. Their brain starts from connection. How do I connect with people? How do I find connection to other individuals? So you actually are energized being around people different. You're energized being outdoor. You're energized traveling outside the country. Like right now, like that's the biggest pain I'm hearing from people with connectedness is the realization that travel is basically limited for 6 months or more. It's painful because to travel is to be able to connect with a world. Also, if you are too much in your own context, we literally have people on this call right now from I think 4 different countries at this moment. So it's not about black, Latino, whatever, U.S. versus whatever. Families in a context. If everyone in your context looks the same, it is less energizing than being in a place where not everyone looks the same. People with connectedness in Afghanistan worked really well with all the different nationalities as I was working in the government there. It's really interesting. Some people with connectedness, they do this well. So when it comes to connectedness, the essence is connection. It is patterns. It is seeing cause and effect. When they communicate on the big picture. So communication, the whole. And so when you hear people making decisions that are siloed, when you people solving just tiny problems, ignoring the bigger issue, that's going to bug you because you're about the whole. But what about the big picture? What about the bigger conversation? What matters? Because you see that from a business perspective as well as individual. So connectedness, it's always about cause. But again, make connection for others, not yourself. I know people with connectedness who are deeply passionate about the cause, but they put themselves at the center of the wheel. Everybody connects to me. Well, that can be dangerous. And in fact, connectedness, you may find if connectedness is dominant for you, that you can struggle sometimes to let people out of your life that you need to let out of your life. Because your brain connects, it doesn't sever. And I had someone once say to me, every time I meet them, I'm old, guys. I'm about to be 46, I think. As soon as, like in the old days, we had these games where you would take string and tie it to things and make patterns or like pegboards or whatever. And so you tie different strings from the center and you can make all these different designs. Connectedness will say that when they meet someone, they tie a connection between them and that person. And every time they meet them, they tie another one and another one. So to suddenly sever that is to have to cut those strings. And connectedness feels that. Laying people off right now, extremely difficult and exhausting. The thought of not having someone in their life, the other person has to remove themselves before they're typically able to sever it. If this is a theme that's dominant for you and you don't have other decision-making themes. The dark side of connectedness. The dark side, paranoia. Why? Because sometimes when I say pass the salt, I'm just saying pass the salt. There's no motive. I don't mean anything else by it. But why did you ask that question? What were you really saying? Because see, connectedness they can see below the surface. They can see patterns and reasons why. Well, connectedness at its most exhausted goes, but what do they really mean by that? But why did they ask it that way? You know, what's interesting is this typically only shows up over distance, meaning not getting to see somebody. The minute you see them, your brain is calm. People with connectedness, this doesn't kick in if you actually have a regular time where you get to see and engage that person. But physically not being in the same space with them, being overtired, being stressed, you may find that your brain spins the worst case scenarios and nothing will make it stop until you hear their voice or see the whites of their eyes. Does that sound right, connectedness? So when you find yourself getting into the paranoia mode, breathe. Okay, wait a minute. We had therapists on my team years ago, Mike and Mary, and they used to always say, avoid the extreme response. Avoid the extreme response. It's never going to be as good or as bad as you think it's going to be. And then verify. Try to get them on the phone. Try to see them, because that matters. Connectedness, the dark side, is paranoia, where you develop scenarios and challenges that aren't actually real. Questions on connectedness? Anybody? This is good. We still good? Just keep rolling. Give me a thumb if you're on video. If you are, cool, sweet. All right. Responsibility. Who has responsibility? All right, a few of you. Okay. Responsibility is the top 5 most commonly occurring themes. So not as if it shows up. The essence. The essence. See, I got somebody else joining in here. Cherry's in the room. Hold on. The essence of responsibility is going to be ownership. Okay? People with its ownership. They own their words. They own the decisions they make. They own this core idea of, and responsibility, by the way, it partners up with other themes. So whatever responsibility partners with, just to use the connectedness, because we just did it, if responsibility and connectedness partner, they own people feeling connected. Responsibility context, they own making sure we don't forget the past. If responsibility developer connect, I own making sure that you grow. I own your progress. I own making sure that it's incremental improvement. If it's responsibility achiever, I own, meaning it's my idea to make you're actually getting work done. So the essence is own. That means then that if you have responsibility, one of the filters for you is this my problem? You may find that you only work on things that are my problem. And I have found over the years that your personal health, age, experience, maturity impact this. Responsibility when it's young says, I own almost everything. They take on too much. They're obligated for people's feelings, the situations, their friends. They kind of take all of that on, right? But then over time, they go, yeah, I can't take all that. Okay, I own me, you own you. And they start to develop a boundary a little bit. They start to frame that out. Responsibility is at its best when it can be clear, but limited. Be clear, but limit. Limit your responsibility. Hey, what exactly am I responsible for right now? What does that look like? And so even in these uncertain times, as I'm working with a lot of athletic coaches right now, whose teams are having to try to exercise remotely and do their workouts from home, I'm shifting them into, why don't you tell them what you can and can't tell them every week? Say, hey, through communicating with you weekly, I can't commit to having answers for you. And so we're creating limits. We create milestones. Responsibility likes to work really hard on things. Responsibility gets great satisfaction from hard work. Here's the phrase, hard work that keeps a promise. That keeps a promise. Okay? Hard work that keeps a promise. Because that's what's satisfying. That promise, however, could be to yourself. So what's interesting is that responsibility, you may find, this is also a sign of health for you, is that sometimes that you may find you keep promises to others, but not yourself.
Yeah.
That's a much more difficult conversation. That's where, for me, I'm like, as a coach, I'm like, you need a coach at that point, because we need to talk about what that looks like. Why is it that other people deserve that, but you don't? Whereas it's worth setting your word to them. If something becomes too exhausting, the other trick to manage it is milestones. Give yourself milestones to pivot, because responsibility, what it does is it manages its resources based on the finish line. Finish line is everything. What did I say I would do? So responsibility is going to flop dead across that finish line when they're all said and done. Well, what so happens when I suddenly move the finish line 5 feet? People are like, oh, it's not that big of a deal. It's only 5 feet. Responsibility says I would have stepped different from step 1 if I had known that finish line was 5 feet further. So before they commit, they want to know commitment going to be. Responsibility believes there's a right and a wrong way to do everything. from how you talk to people to how you load the dishwasher. There's a moral right to everything. And they say things like, I don't know why you want to do it the wrong way, as if the world got the memo. People with responsibility are shocked to discover that not everyone does things the same way they do. So responsibility, when you communicate what you want, when you want it, and here's the thing, what form it should be in. When I'm dealing with executives with responsibility, they'll often say, making a presentation to the board next week, I need your quarterly numbers on my desk by Friday. Friday afternoon, at the last possible moment, the other person sends you a list of the 5 things from the quarterly report. What you thought you said was, I'm presenting our annual board meeting. My assistant has a slide deck. I need your information to go into slide number 5, use the template, put the information in there so I can pop your slide into my presentation. Instead, they sent you an email with 5 bullets of information. Because when you said I'm presenting to the board, your brain assumed that they were like, oh, this board meeting must have a template. Surely they know they're going to put it in that. But no, now it's Friday, you have 5 pieces of information, you got to redo the slides yourself, and you're saying, why didn't I do this myself? So delegation can be a nightmare for responsibility. The dark side, micromanagement. Responsibility, you are more likely to actually micromanage. You're more likely to be the center and not know how to partner well. So this can really show up though when you go from being an individual contributor to a team leader, because now you have to distribute your influence. And so I see this with coaches. In fact, I have a lot of athletes who have become coaches that I'm working with right now. And for them, this thing is that they know how to be the athlete, and it's a bigger challenge to be the coach, because they can see the performance problem and they know what they would do setting, but solving the problem of what should the other person be doing is a different challenge. Oh, how do I get them to see the problem, not just give them the answer? Responsibility, micromanagement, also being standoffish, because you're like, yeah, I don't want to get involved in that mess. You may find that if you're tired, your world gets smaller and smaller and smaller. Not my problem, not my problem, not my problem. Or you take on, because you're unboundaried, to the point of your own destruction. You're exhausted. You take on way too much. You do too much. And so responsibility is a beautiful theme. It's all about ownership, but it can get exhausted, it can overwork, it can push the bounds. And it can consume you. Small goals, small pieces. It's naturally hardworking. Be super clear about what you're being asked to do. Questions about responsibility? It's a little bit of a heavy one, but it's really powerful, but it's also dangerous. You got to wield it well, like a scalpel, right? Let's see, what was next? Communication. We got a couple people with communication on here. Communication, scribbling away. Communication, people with communication, the essence is understanding. People with communication, they want to be understood. Communication is not about speaking. It is about creating understanding. So they will cook. People with communication like to buy clothes because it expresses the inside on the outside. Communication will go to a movie they really enjoy and then make sure they go back again with all their friends so they can experience the same thing they experienced. They enjoy music and creating music. It is about expression, okay? They facilitate expression in others. And so in fact, when it comes to communication and decision-making, they prioritize solutions they understand. And when it comes to comms, they'll use a volume of words to see if somewhere in there is the answer. If it's by itself. I have found that responsibility and communication together, they actually use quite a bit fewer words. What ends up happening is that with communication, They actually, with responsibility says I own my, I have to be cautious, okay? I have to be very intentional about my language because I own creating understanding. Take away responsibility, communication, you may find that we don't know something, thinking something, until we say it out loud. The act of having to describe it actually makes us clearer. And you'll find that while you're doing coaching sessions even, you're reflecting back, well, here's what I'm hearing you say. People will discover and say things like, that's exactly what I was thinking. I had no idea to say it. I have clients who call me to literally just have me roll and kind of spin around on different ideas so they can grab my language. I have one who refuses to do a call without recording because once I say it once, I typically can't say it again in the same exact way. And so people with communication, we're kind of riffing. We're kind of constantly speaking in that way, if that's one of your expressions. But I've seen dance, I've seen gardening, I've seen cooking, okay? So we don't, if you want us to decide something, you want us to pick your solution, help us understand. Mike, what don't you understand? The dark side. We can focus on being understood. Understood. There's nothing worse communicating and feeling misunderstood or misconstrued. Go ahead and tell us that our words didn't mean what we think they mean. We're like, what? Now we're not going to communicate with you anymore. Now we're going to show you why you just weren't smart enough to get it. And we pivot. So communication will not, so we get so focused in on, man, I've got to be understood. So we'll tell you the same story 6 different times in case you missed it the first time. We'll go again and again and again. We'll avoid people and situations that we don't think get us. That's an exhausting way to live sometimes. My coach, Chris, he loves to say to me, he's like, I'll be like, man, I keep creating this stuff that nobody's reading or watching. And he's like, India, why don't you create stuff you love to create? But I can tell when I'm tired that I get worried about whether or not I'm thinking and what I'm creating because I'm worried about whether or not I understood. So I take my theme and I turn it in on me. Much like significance, turn it out. How do you use your theme to create understanding? How do you use create art that we find ourselves in? Create music that speaks to my soul. Create in an effort to give the world understanding, not to have yourself be understood. Does that resonate with anybody? Mm-hmm. All right. I'm gonna hit, I got 10 more minutes. I'm gonna hit some more here. I'll hit positivity. Would that be cool? Positivity. Thank you for the thumbs up, Haroon. Okay. People with positivity. Positivity is a relational theme. The essence of positivity is faith, meaning faith that it's going to be okay. It's going to work out. You ask positivity, is it going to be all right? I have positivity. I'm like, yeah, it's going to be great. How do you know? I have no idea. I just know it's going to be great. Now, the reality is there's reasons, but it's so deeply intuitive to me that it would take too long to express it. So positivity starts from yes. Yes is where we begin. We believe we can do it. What's the point of stepping in if you're not going to? So in fact, we are energized by being around people who start with yes. Positivity is really about energy as well. Meaning we get being around people who are positive. Having positivity does not mean you're always positive. In fact, you can be downright negative. It can be exhausting. People with positivity are exhausted around those who are positive. I mentioned the other day, proximity to people who are negative just sucks the life out of us. Even negativity that's not directed at us. Having to listen, having to hear the complaining, having to hear the frustration, over time, it is like air out of our tank. And so you can literally, I tell people all the time, you can look at your calendar on a Monday morning if your week is booked out and know exactly how you're going to feel on Friday based on the meetings that you have. positivity in their head, they can tell before the meeting, will it be negative, neutral, positive, neutral, or negative? So the trick you positivity in this is you have got to plan your schedule to balance your energy. If you need time between meetings, pick yourself up, you got to start blocking that between meetings. If you have meetings that are many negative meetings back to back, you got a positive meeting end. This is especially true on weekends. If your week Friday ends up being negative and exhausting, then you're going to suddenly, if you end Friday in a deficit, you're going to have to suck out your family to get positive before Monday. Your meetings on Friday have to end up. They've got to end on the upside, or you're likely to be exhausted too long. Positivity, however, does not mean you're always positive. In fact, you can be negative sometimes. Sometimes positive partners up with strategic problem-solving themes. And what ends up happening is you go, if I can point out all the negatives, then it'll be positive. So, in fact, my buddy Dwight's on the call here. Dwight knows there's times when I'm getting pushing and my positivity kicks in and I start laser pointing all the landmines. And that's my positivity. Because I'm like, if I can point the landmines out, then we're gonna be fine. But even then, it can sound negative and makes others with positivity exhausted. Positivity, when it comes to communication, they communicate with encouragement. They prioritize solutions that'll have the greatest human impact positively. They prioritize plans. They keep people in the picture. People have to be in the decision-making matrix. When it comes to the dark side, the dark side of positivity is one, we allow others to rob from us in our positivity, ultimately. But two, we can get depressed and check out. Okay? We can get depressed in that it ends up being, I lost my screen here. What happens is that, you know, Greg says to me, Mike, is it gonna be okay? I'm like, yes, it's gonna be great. It's gonna be great. Greg's like, how do you know? I'm like, it's okay, Greg. Oh. And every day I'm Mr. It's gonna be great. It's gonna be great. Then after enough time, the situation, I'm sick of hearing the negative. I protect myself. I just taking in the negative. And then Anna says to me at the other, is it still gonna be okay? I'm like, it's gonna be. And then one more person walks in and complains about it, some situation we're working on. It's kind of like the last straw. Finally, much straw that breaks the camel's back. The next morning, I walk in to the office and Greg's like, is it gonna be okay, Mike? And I'm like, no, it's bad. We're all gonna die. And you're like, what just happened? He went from being Mr. Positive to being miserable because the situation became hopelessly negative, and now I'm going to check out. I'm going to distance myself, protect myself from you. And I'm done. Now, if the situation changes, I might re-engage. But if not, I just say things. Here's the other real dark side is, if I'm tired, I avoid the negative conversation. If I need to have a real deep conversation with you and it feels like pain, whew, terrible. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to bring it up. I had PTSD in 2019 following my very last trip to Afghanistan. Some craziness happened with our client and some other stuff, but that's another story. But legitimately, I noticed the first sign of PTSD for me were that I couldn't watch TV shows with too much negative conflict. If there was emotional conflict on the TV show, I had to change the channel, which, we're talking sitcoms, people. Like, we're not talking deep crap. And even now, I can tell what I can handle, because positivity is a sign of how strong I'm being or not. So the dark side of positivity is you start to avoid. You start to hunt for the easy way out. You start to not want to do negative interaction. Much like the other themes, it ends up being a barometer for yourself of your current state. When it comes to making sure the key is plan your schedule around how will my last meeting of the day be. I say, look at your day. Give it a positive, a 0, or a negative. Positive energy, neutral energy, negative energy. Look at it. What's your day going to be? Because right now, if you have positivity, you can tell me. So we have hit significance, which is its core essence is legacy. What will they say about me when we're dead? Will I do things that last? We hit context. People with context believe our past informs our future. They don't like to repeat mistakes. They're like a train on a track. Keep things moving. We did responsibility. Responsibility. I own, making sure that I own, I'm committed, I'm doing hard work, I'm keeping promises. We hit communication. It's about understanding. People with communication, it's about creating messages and expressions that create understanding in themselves and others. And positivity. People with positivity, they influence. I'm going to end with this. People with positivity, Gallup found in doing research with Best Buy, 2 sites, same metrics, different teams, one team with positivity, one team without. The team with positivity outperformed the team without positivity 100% of the time. They found that just having that person who, even without details, says it's going to be okay, if you listen to them, it ups the performance of everyone around them. Positivity has a positive influence on motion. Here's what we're going to do. Next week, I'm going to dive in and we'll do more of this. I'll probably pick up the pace a little bit. I'll have less questions. If you have questions for me as we're kind of diving in, let's see. I've got some chat stuff here. If you have questions for me that you'd like me to launch the next class with, just shoot me a DM, shoot me an email, md@michaeldauphinee.com. I'm going to this one up again today, this afternoon, so you can have this class on YouTube. But if you wanted to get a jump start on understanding the full 34, again, I think Sean shared it. You can find my 34 videos on the YouTube channel as well. Go ahead, hit subscribe. I'm thinking about redoing those and updating those in the summer. But is this helpful, guys? Because I thought it'd be good to just talk through these pieces, each one, kind of like give you the deeper side, because there's an essence of them. You start to mix it, you're like, this is how we mix these pieces together. When we finish up, I want our last session to be like real community, like coaching. Like I'm gonna take someone's 5 and show you how I think when it comes to reading a profile. I want you to be able to understand that. So, hey guys, thanks so much for being here. I hope this has been encouraging for you. I really hope that it's something in your week. And if you're interested and we get to the end and we have some more things to cover, I might go more than to help support and cover all the material if you need it. But appreciate you guys. Have a great day. Thanks so much. Look for this online.
Thanks, Mike.
Take care.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Mike. See y'all.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, Todd.
Thanks, Mike. You're the best. Always love learning from you.
Thanks, Marsha.
Thank you, Michael. It was wonderful.
Thanks, everyone. Be well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Stay safe.
Thanks so much.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Jessica, Anna, Todd. Good to see you, Greg.
Well, you too, Mike.
I saw you took strength. I saw you. We have to do a one-on-one.
Did you report?
I saw you. Have you seen your report?
Yeah, I did.